So welcome everybody to our chat with Marisa Silva, and the topic is how to become a PMO leader, or do you want to become a PMO leader, or did you ever think about becoming a PMO leader? That's the talk for this evening. Now, I had the privilege to meet Marisa in about 2 years ago at a PMI event in Gdansk in Poland, and I was at your talk, and it was a great talk, lots of energy. And then Shira said, we got to get Marisa, and I went, sure, that's a good idea. Okay, so Marisa, we always ask, what drink do you have in front of you? So if you have a beer or a wine from your local country, what is it?
Well, I actually have a Porto wine, which is from here, from Portugal. It's a dessert wine, sweet wine, properly not appropriate for this time of the day, but nevertheless quite a nice one. So that's my choice for today.
Okay, great.
Cheers, everyone.
What's the name of it?
The brand or the type of the wine? The brand is called Ferreira, which is actually part of my surname, Marisa Silva. It's not my vineyard though, but
okay.
Still.
All right, yeah, I know what you mean. Okay, good. Right. So, can we start with some questions about a PMO first of all? So, why do companies need a PMO? Why would any company need a PMO?
Okay. So I don't think that all companies need the PMO. It's important to say that, although I'm in favor of PMOs, it's important to mention that there might be cases where PMO might not be needed. In fact, I think that if the world of projects was perfect, probably wouldn't need PMOs. But unfortunately, we don't live in that world. So therefore, the PMO as a supporting entity can be quite a good thing to have. Now, if you are in a company that doesn't have projects, you won't need a PMO. If those competencies are dotted somewhere around the business, around the organization, the competencies that a PMO team would have, then I think also that in that case, as long as they are talking to each other, that they are communicating, PMO as an entity of its own would not be needed either. So there are some cases where we might say that the PMO is not necessary. However, for the other cases where we are managing projects, where you don't have those competencies somewhere in the business, the PMO might be a key ingredient for the success of projects, I believe. Not in the way that they will be managing the projects, but in the way that how they will be supporting the projects, being integrators in the business, ensuring that the processes are communicating, that the people are communicating, that lessons are being integrated, and also breaking those silos that we so often have between departments. So that's one of the key benefits that I see of having PMOs in place.
How do companies decide that they need a PMO? When does the light go on and they go like, okay, we're stuck, we've got to do something?
From my experience, usually that is when they have a very important project that goes wrong. So it's not something that they are going to seek proactively, although I see some changes in the market nowadays. So I think that more people are interested in knowing how they could establish a PMO, what would be the benefits of having one. Yeah. But most often it is still because there is a project that was wrong, or unfortunately because there's an audit that says so. And that is actually something that I'm a high critic of, because the need for the PMO needs to come from within. It needs to be perceived rather than imposed from the outside. So I think that's also why many PMOs fail. They fail because they are born out of a need that is not actually there.
I see. Now, how did you get, let's go back to your career. So did you start off as a project manager? And then how did that evolve to becoming a PMO leader? I think that's the main question which people would like to be answered.
Mm-hmm. Well, in project management, I did some, I had 2 roles before I worked in project management. So I was a billing and credit controller, which was not exciting at all. I don't know. Billing and credit controller. And I also worked for a couple of months in a call center, so in the very beginning. But then when I started in project management, that was as a consultant. So I was managing projects as a consultant for organizations, not just setting up PMOs, defining the project management methods, also doing training and delivering some project management implementation. Some project management tool implementation, like for instance, Project Server at the time, or Project Server integrated with TFS, Team Foundation Server. And since then, I've then worked in PMOs as a PMO analyst, also as a PMO manager, manager of a competency center in project management, and currently as a consultant, I'm also managing projects for my clients and managing the implementation of PPM tools for some clients.
I see.
Well, and business change, of course. So setting up PMOs, doing maturity assessments, all that kind of funny stuff, the exciting world of PMOs.
So you're saying then it happened based on your experience with projects, you sort of fell into PMO management. Is that correct?
Not exactly. In my case, I think I was lucky to be part of a company that I believe to be best in class when it comes to project management consultancy in Portugal. So I was mentored into project management and into what a PMO would mean. So I would say that I was quite fortunate in that sense, because I explained from the very beginning, this is what a good PMO looks like. This is what we already have in place. This is what we are doing with our clients too. And now we want you to be part of it. So I went through, we had 6 months of training pretty much, being interns, participating in smaller projects, so in a controlled environment, and I expanded from there.
Okay, all right. What advice would you give to someone who says, I want to go from a project manager, let's say with 5 years experience, to be a PMO leader or PMO manager? Mm-hmm.
It's funny that you ask that, because I think that at least in the past, there was still much perception that the PMO would be just an entry path, an entry route to become a project manager. Nowadays, in our PMO practitioner courses, for instance, we see the opposite. We see many PMs wanting to expand or to become PMO professionals, which is, I think, a sign that the market is also paying more attention to PMO professional, PMO analysts, PMO manager, whatever it is, as a role that in itself could almost be seen as a profession, or at least that it shows a career, that it contains a career path of its own. If you want to do that transition, I would say that there are a couple of things that you need to know. The first one is, of course, that the focus is not so much on delivery, or at least on delivery at 1 or 2 projects. Most PMOs tend to operate in a more holistic view, in the way that we are looking perhaps at a program or even at a portfolio level. So, of course, this is not exclusive to PMOs, but the business context, I would say, is much more relevant in this case, ensuring that our projects are adhering to the strategic objectives of the company. Ensuring also that from a capability perspective, that we have the tools that allow us to support others. So the project management role can be quite, I would say, isolated, almost in a bubble. Sometimes we just want to deliver the project and move to the next one, and that's it. We don't have that time very often to share that knowledge, to work with the others, to help them improve and increase in their improving their careers. So the PMO would certainly have a role to play there. So on the capability side as well.
All right. So I can see then that the PMO is responsible for centralizing the data from all the different projects. You said something very important then, that it's not focused on delivery, but more on information flow. Is that correct?
It can be. I don't like to say the PMO is this or the PMO is that. I don't believe in PMO types. When we say, oh, this is operational PMO, this is strategic PMO, this is an enterprise one. The PMO, to be sustainable and to be valuable in the eyes of the business, needs to be what the business wants it to be. Okay. So if that is focusing on collecting data for the portfolio projects, fine. If that means just focusing on supporting our agile teams or let's say working with the PMs to help them with their planning, fine. So it depends on what the business would value, because you might be very successful on your own bubble, but if others don't perceive it, the PMO will be soon gone.
Okay, so we can have just a supporting role for project managers, or it can have a reporting up to role to upper management so they can take better decisions.
Exactly. At the end of the day, they are an enabler. So it's an enabler entity for better decision making. But of course, how do we get there? There are different ways.
Okay. Have you been involved in presenting month-to-month reports to upper management? And if you have, how has that gone? How does that work?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and sorry, Frank, I'm just looking at the chat because the messages are popping up about people are also asking about what is a PMO. It can stand for Project Management Office, Program Management Office, Portfolio Management Office. There are several debates in the community about what does the P stand for. Is that the key question? Honestly, I don't mind what you call it. The most interesting one that I've heard about PMOs, and now please pardon my French, was pisses me off. So you can see how dissatisfied people were with this PMO at the time. So it doesn't have to mean anything in particular. Of course, if you look into the textbooks, into the theory, the name would align to whatever is the entity that is being supported. So we would have a PMO or a PSO if we are supporting a project. But I've also know of program management offices that are not specifically supporting a dedicated program. They are supporting programs and projects. So I would say the name can be misleading. We should focus more on the mission and the vision of the PMO instead. But now going back to your question about reporting to the upper management.
Yeah.
I think that one of the main responsibilities and one of the main benefits of having a PMO is also the fact that that the PMO would be the single trusted source of truth, in the way that we would be able to challenge the data that we are given, not because we just want to challenge the PMs. In fact, I think there is also a lack of trust in organizations that need to be overcome at some point. And hopefully the situation now with the pandemic is forcing people to realize that. But at the same time, I think that the PMO can then be that filtering on the information that is given by comparing it with others. Because a project that's being reported as very critical or with a high level of exposure to risk, in comparison with others, might not be that critical. So the PMO having that holistic view would be able to then be much more confident on the information that is being presented. Also, it would present, or it would provide that layer of assurance that is not always available to the PMs. Of course, you can self-assure your own work, but correcting your own homework will not be that beneficial, I would say, because you are more prone to self-inflate those figures, those perceptions, or on the other hand, to be too harsh on yourself. So the PMO would then be that element that will provide that transparency, that visibility, and therefore by collating and working with the PMs to bring that information together would allow the upper management to be able to make better decisions. Also identifying where our watermelon projects are. So the ones that look green on the outside, but actually when you look closer, they are red, bright red on the inside. So that would be, again, following from what I was mentioning, an opportunity for the PMO to challenge and to provide that confidence that what we have here is the reality of our portfolio of projects.
Okay, thank you. If anybody wants to ask a question, please ask in the chat, so we'll both look at it. Ellie also mentioned that the sound is pretty quiet, so if you can hear me okay, or if you can hear Marisa okay. Marisa, for me, you're coming through loud and clear, so.
Okay, good.
Just it. Okay, the question from Suti. Oh, it's gone away again. Is a PMO model impact on industrial innovations? Is a PMO model impact?
In the way if it can impact, or if it's being impacted by? Sorry, let me just have a look.
Can you rephrase that question so we can answer it? Oh, it's just me that's not clear, Ellie said, my voice. Okay, I'll hold my mic like this to make sure. Good. So we hear a lot about AI, okay? Mm-hmm. Do you think, and you also mentioned a nice phrase, you mentioned a PMO can be the single source of truth. Okay, I like that phrase. Do you think there is still a need for PMOs in a world where project management is supported by AI?
I believe so. I've read some reports saying that if AI expands as it's expected to, that the role of the PM will be diminished and the role of the PMO will not be necessary. I actually disagree. I think that it will provide an opportunity for the PMO to focus on the areas, the services that provide most value to the organizations. So you don't need to spend time producing reports. We don't need to spend time looking into lessons. AI could facilitate that work for us. Instead, we should be working, let's say, with our portfolio managers, ensuring that we are selecting the right projects, that they are being prioritized, that they are being well balanced in terms of risk, in terms of return, resources, and so on. So I think that at the end of the day, AI, in the same way as any technology, will facilitate decision making. But at the end of the day, humans make decisions, not technology. In fact, I once found something, I think it was from one of the conferences from the Bright Line Initiative, where they had a poll where they asked the delegates if which one would they value the most when making a decision. If they would go with, it was not technology, but it was similar to technology, something powered by technology, or if they would trust their instinct, their gut. And despite all the data, and big data has become very popular recently, despite all the data that is available, people would still go with their gut. So data is only as good as what you make with it, I guess.
Yeah, and some mistakes are made because it all depends on the time of the day as well.
Mm-hmm.
You're
Also
making those decisions on your gut. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now I'm going to ask an agile related question. What's the role of PMOs in the context of agile and self-organizing teams?
Okay, so agile. I love the topic of the agile PMO, that mythical creature that some people do have. I think that agile has been misused, mistreated, misunderstood. So I think there are several misconceptions out there about what it is. So I prefer to talk about agility. And at the end of the day, call it waterfall or agile, which as pure concepts, I haven't seen them in practice any time, because to my knowledge, project management has always incorporated principles of agility, and agile, as it has been presented, would also benefit from the governance and the controls that what is considered classical or waterfall would include. And I bring some quotes in here because, as mentioned, I don't like to see the world in black and white. I don't think that exists in project management. Now, if we were to position the PMO in that context, the context of how agile is currently presented, I would say that the role of the PMO will be more on providing capability, enabling the capability of the agile teams. So it's not so much about being that control and command picture that we have of PMOs, which fortunately I think most people now appreciate it's outdated. It's not where we should be. So we are moving more and more from that positioning. And I think that in a way, agile has also led to it, which there are some positives in that fact. So in a world where agile and PMOs coexist, I think that the role of the PMO would be one of understanding what agile means for that organization, because it doesn't mean the same thing for all. And then based on it, we'll also knock on the door of our agile teams and ask, how can I support you? So rather than making assumptions, rather than just trying to impose a template, a project plan, a change request, let's actually see how we can work with the agile teams. Okay, they don't complete lessons learned report, but they do have retrospectives. So let's go there and actually work on those retrospectives with them and bring those retrospectives so that we can share it with other teams that might not be using that same approach. So it would be more about building that trust with agile, with agile teams in this case, and then seeing how we can then adapt the services of the PMO to meet their own needs, rather than try to use the same approach for any type of project and for any type of approach being used.
Good, I like that. Sanjit is online. Sanjit, can you come in?
Yeah, hi. So thanks, Marisa, for giving a brief introduction. My question is, I just typed it. Is PMO has a lot of principles and methods. So I morely focus on the PMO principles. Is there any impact of PMO principles on organization innovation?
I would say that regardless of the industry of where that PMO operates, regardless of the context, the benefits of having the PMO should be fairly similar. Now, this would more be present depending on the maturity levels of the organization. So not that much if it is an innovation type of project, innovation-led, or if it is a compliance-led type of project, but instead in regards to the maturity of the organization. So if it is low maturity, you'll certainly see the benefits in a much more meaningful way. So I wouldn't say there is any clear or any meaningful type of impact in that scenario in particular. I hope I've answered your question. Let me know otherwise.
Is that okay, Sanjit?
Yeah, because I'm just doing my doctorate on PMO, and
oh, okay.
I'm trying my topic is that the PMO principles and their impact on the organization behavior, organization innovation.
Right.
And I'm looking that I'm in very initial stage, and I'm just not clear with that. So I'm just trying to have some expert view over that. So, and that's why I just wanted to that deep dive over that the innovation can correlate with PMO principles.
I would say that PMO can accelerate that innovation, but that would happen just as a side consequence rather than the focus of it on its own. But anyway, I would be very keen to know the findings of your research. So once you have more views, please do let me know what the results were. We're very interested to know more about it.
Thank you,
Sure.
Sanjit. I have a question also from Gert at Clustermans. You kind of covered this already, I think, or you mentioned it, but it's a good question. So how do you convince your boss of your team with your gut feeling? Because in most cases, they will ask for proof, you know? So
yes, and at the end of the day, what was the opinion without data? I think it makes a very weak argument to, particularly if that person is very rational and very, let's say, very focused on figures, on calculations. So you might as well just present something that makes sense to them. So I would first of all try to understand what type of personality you are presenting to, because there are people who get the message better if you present a full report with rational arguments on why having this decision is the right thing to do. There are others who just need to see it on a wall, so they are more the visual type of personality. So although I don't like to pigeonhole people against personalities, in fact, even in the PMO, we should try to frame our conversation and frame our, in this case, our decision or our recommendation based on individuals that we are presenting to. If we look, for instance, at the example of pet projects, so pet projects, they are emotional by nature. There is no rational decision there most of the cases. So there is no solid business case to do so. So in those situations, what I always say is you can try to go with the rational argument, and that will convince probably the rest of the group, but not the sponsor who is still presenting that pet project. So in order to build the case in front of that sponsor, we need to tackle it in a different way. We need to go emotional as well. Sometimes even ask some naive questions, which is putting ourselves in the role of the end user, and then saying, how will this help me? So almost doing a user story for it. So you wouldn't go with business case calculations, net present value. Can help, but at the end of the day, that sponsor would say, yes, but. So we need to tackle it with emotional reasons too.
Okay, thank you. Next question is from Chris. And Chris, can you unmute yourself, or do I have to do that for you? Yeah.
Hi, Marisa. So my question is more related to PMO when you talk about portfolio management. And I've been managing a portfolio, but I was always struggling on how do you promote good projects or good programs within a portfolio, and what's your best practice, because it tends to be sometimes subjective, and then people try to manipulate. I know the scoring systems, and then yes, I would like to hear from you what is your best experience on that one. And secondly, it's related to that. How do you create a good balance between short and long-term benefits within a portfolio of projects?
Okay, so answering the first question about how to do that selection and prioritization of projects. I would start by asking if that is done by the portfolio managers or the business unit directors themselves, or if the PMO is also participating in that type of selection. So again, the PMO can then play that devil's advocate on how the projects are being selected. So I would start there, having the PMO being part of that conversation. What I sometimes call being part of the grown-ups discussion. In there, we could, of course, look into scoring models. So as mentioned, that is a known approach. But even for those scoring models, we should have some criteria behind it. So it should not just be, give me the weight from 1 to 5 on what you think is the best thing to do here. So you should try to make it as objective as possible, clearly setting of what those measures mean, and even having some weights. Like for instance, one technique that I've seen, not in particular for the selection, but for business case development from a company, was where they appreciated that internally they were very biased in the way that they were very optimistic on the figures that they were presenting, that the project would cost less than it would be done quicker than it actually was, and so on. So in order to minimize that risk, they actually are now forcing people to discount a certain rate, a certain percentage, which is the optimism bias percentage in this case. So discounted it in the root, acknowledging that there is an issue there. If you do know that there is this issue when projects are being selected, we need to understand who is calling the shots and what is the main driver for it. Because if we do know what that driver is, we can then try to put some measures to tackle that driver in particular. So in this case, I was just mentioning the business case as an example, but others could apply too. Then when building that scoring model, I would also advise taking into consideration the balance of that portfolio. So not just do what are the projects that have the highest score. I would say that's a very limited, narrowed view, but also seeing if this is the right time for us to do those type of projects. So also need to consider the risk that those projects will bring, the resources, if you have the availability for the necessary resource or not, and then the return. So for instance, now, in the middle of a pandemic, I think that from a portfolio management perspective, we reached a point where actually there were some side effects of the pandemic, because at least for some of my clients, they actually had to revisit all of their portfolios, because all of a sudden, and I'm working with some councils, and their revenue stream was just cut. So they had to manage whatever they still had in hands, and with a limited budget, limited resources, they were just scrutinizing project by project, one by one, and say, we cannot do this anymore. So I think that a positive side effect of this pandemic was actually that the realization that we can no longer pay lip service to portfolio management. Mm. So identifying what those criteria would be in an objective way, identifying what or who is driving that conversation and what are the drivers for that person, and then also trying to apply some peer pressure in a way by having the PMO being part of that conversation and challenging what is being suggested. Okay. Of course, with arguments that are valid.
Is that okay, Chris? Are you happy now?
Yeah, thank you.
Great. You mentioned something, you mentioned a scoring model, and that's what I think of when I think of PMOs. Have you ever helped a company to put a scoring model together?
I have, yes. And in fact,
how did that go?
It went well, although it's always the thing with transparency. People want transparency, not realizing that there are then some responsibilities that come with transparency. Sometimes they don't want to see what is obvious, or what is sometimes, yes, like the pet project, sometimes more concerning and
Yes.
that they were trying to put, how do you say, under the carpet. So I think
pet projects will die with scoring models.
exactly.
Yeah.
So the realization that that scoring model will bring that transparency is something that needs to be managed very carefully as a proper business change type of activity. So it's not just something, oh, here's the scoring model. We actually need to sit with those portfolio managers, explain what this will do, try to find also some examples that we can put to test. So to generate that confidence that that will be a suitable tool for them to make decisions.
Okay. All right, good.
In fact, as
Thank
part of one of the courses that we delivered at the company I work for, we actually build this tool and provide this tool as a freebie that is part of the course.
Okay, you mean
So it's something
a
that people do
scoring
see.
model? Okay.
Exactly.
Good. I had one more question there coming up. I knew there'd be a question on tools. There always is. This is from Taha. What are some of the enterprise tools, processes that are commonly used in the PMO world? Are they industry specific, like Microsoft or Google environments?
Well, I'm biased in this question because I work for a Microsoft partner.
Okay.
And I also implement PPM tools, project portfolio management tools. So Microsoft Project Online, Power BI as a reporting tool that integrates with it. But there is a variety of tools, even now, not just from known suppliers in the industry, and I'm thinking of the worlds of Claris and Jira and all, PlanView, etc. But also even online for free, there are some suitable tools. So thinking of Basecamp, projectmanagement.com. So there are several. Then when it comes to processes, this will depend mostly on what are also the services and the functions provided by the PMO. So at what level we're operating and what the business wants from us. But it can include services ranging from portfolio selection, prioritization, debt balancing. It can include reporting and monitoring. It can include training, coaching, and mentoring to our project managements, providing, assisting in their certification process, building career paths for the project profession. It can also be facilitating workshops for risk management, for lessons learned, or we can be considering more specialist roles within a PMO, like for instance, on quality assurance, on communications, scheduling, risk management, change, etc.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Suppose if a person was to find themselves in a new company and this company didn't seem to have a very good understanding of project management to begin with. Mm-hmm. How would you sell them the idea of a PMO? Who should you talk to in the company? And what should you say? And
right.
What wine should you bring?
Exactly. Bring wine, bring biscuits, and everything will be fine. So I like to think of PMOs as services to be provided rather than just a department or a group of people. So as a service, we have customers. So we have customers for our PMOs. So we need to understand who our customers are. And I'm just thinking, for instance, of the project teams, the project managers, the senior leadership team, heads of department, even the learning and development department. They might also have specific requirements for the PMO. So identifying who they are, and then do not make assumptions. Actually go knock on the door and ask, what is troubling you? You have been working on projects, what is not working? And then we will build the services of the PMO in order to meet those expectations. Because this is something that I see happening very often, which is people read in a book how to implement a PMO, and then they just go straight into doing the delivery. And then they try to convince everyone that that was a great idea. That's not how you build buy-in. The PMO, in my view, to be successful needs to be co-created. Now, if we're talking about a company that has low maturity, that doesn't even understand or values what good project management is, I would start with the basics. So seeing what is the most critical concern for the projects that are being run in that organization. If that is the fact that our projects do not meet the budget or do not meet the timescales, let's start there. Let's not try to go with sophisticated models like earned value management or doing Monte Carlo analysis for risk management. Let's stick with the basics, build those foundations, solid foundations, and also, even if that organization doesn't get project management, because projects can also have some reputation, let's say, people sometimes have traumas of working in projects. Let's then just change the conversation. Just call it work. Just call it something that is meaningful to that organization. Don't call it a Gantt chart. Call it a list of tasks, if you prefer. So something that seems simple to use, and using their own terminology, the terminology of the industry.
Okay, all right, thank you. A question from Shiro. Where should a PMO fit in an organization? So who should, or who he or she should report to?
This would much depend on what context that PMO is serving. If we are talking, let's say, an enterprise PMO, this would likely be the CIO, so it should be at the C level, I would say. Very often PMOs are born in the IT department, curiously enough. So that also tends to be linked to a CTO or a CIO very often, based on my experience. But it's not exclusive to that area, particularly if we're talking about an enterprise PMO. So I would say some role at the C level, CTO, CIO, and so on. Now, of course, if we're talking about a departmental PMO, then that PMO should report to the head of the department.
Okay.
But I should also say, because there is this view that sometimes PMOs fail because they don't have sponsorship. I disagree. I think sponsorship is a nice to have. I don't think it is a consequence of PMO failure. I would see the lack of sponsorship more of a symptom of something that is not working in the PMO rather than the cause for the PMO to fail. Because it's like everywhere. If you are successful, people want to meet you. They want to talk to you. They want to be associated with you. So if the PMO is doing things right, I'm sure you will find a sponsor. Someone will be saying, oh, do you need sponsorship? So it's actually the other way around.
But based on that, don't some departments think like the PMO, like a watchdog there as well as helping projects, but they're also checking to see that everything is going okay as well and reporting up. So
there's a fine balance there, because we want watchdogs. We need those watchdogs in a way to avoid those watermelon reports that I was mentioning, but also to ensure that the budget that we are investing on projects is being well spent. And sometimes that is not just a conversation between the PMs and the PMO. It's actually between the PMO and the other heads of department who might have their own pet projects. So the PMO should be as independent as possible. But at the same time, if we are reporting, let's say, to a head of department, it should be independent also in the context of where it is being supported. Now, if we were to say that it is a watchdog, yes, that's fine. But at the same time, it also needs to build that trust within the project teams that they are reporting the projects for a reason. So we shouldn't just be monitoring the projects for the sake of saying that we are monitoring the projects. The PMO should not be, should not be a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. So it should be the other way around. So it should only be created if there is indeed a problem that needs solving, where the PMO can assist. So building that trust within the project management team, I think it also requires that the PMO reports its own performance. It's all about building that credibility first. So, okay, I might be here to help you and report your projects, to be the watchdog for the projects, but I also want you to be the watchdog for my own performance. So I don't see the PMO as more elevated than the PMs. They're actually in the same place, the same level, it's just with different missions.
Yeah, on the same team, let's say.
Exactly.
We're almost near the end, so if anybody wants to get a last question in, please do so. I got one question from Daniela. What do you consider to be the most important trait of a PMO manager to provide value for their team and also for the stakeholders, and why?
So if we are to talk about the PMO overall, so not at the individual level, I would say the focus on the business. So never lose sight that you, PMO, exist for a reason. It's not just to be there and to say that the organization has a PMO. We exist to facilitate the projects, to ensure that those projects are being translated into something meaningful for the organization, so leading the strategy of the organization. So I would say that focus on the business, that business context. If I'm talking about the individual perspective, I would say, and this is now a comment that I would expand to anyone working in project management, so it's not exclusive to the PMO, but it's something that I think it really makes a difference. It's emotional intelligence. So having that capability to understand your own emotions and to also help the others by understanding their own emotions. So we would do management of the team, understanding or by ensuring that those emotions are are being understood, and that the PMO can then manage the team based on that feedback.
Emotional intelligence takes time, doesn't it? I mean, you've got to do it, try it out, but also take time to think how you're doing it and where you can improve.
Yes, it's some reflection also. Some reflection that I think is also something that is missing in project management as a profession. But that's another event, another webinar. But it's funny that we are talking about emotional intelligence today also, because I was participating of an event yesterday, and someone asked what should be the key soft skill to have. And I also mentioned emotional intelligence, but I made the remark that I don't consider it to be a soft skill. I think that's actually the hard part of the job, to understanding, because knowing how to work with the MS project, knowing how to build a business case, yes, it takes some experience, it takes time, it takes knowledge, but it's much easier than being emotional intelligent. So that's the hard part for me.
Let's say it's the hardest soft skill.
Exactly.
Another question from Katsina. What do you need to make the collaboration between project managers and the PMO as successful as possible? And that's the second last question.
Don't be an elitist.
Don't be what?
Don't be the elite. Don't be in at the top, considering that you are. Exactly. Thank you. So we are working with the project managers. The PMO exists for them. It's not for anyone else. Well, it can also be for the senior leadership team, but at the end of the day, we are there to support their projects, to enable them to deliver better. So we need to co-create the PMO. And I want to emphasize that. So it's not an idea that we are going to then sell it to them. If we are creating a new process, implementing a new tool, let's ask our PMs, what do they think? Would this work for you? Let's build it with them. So co-creation and building that credibility. So if I'm going to demand from you timesheets, project plans, KPIs, then let's start with me, leading by example. Here are my KPIs. This is what I've been doing. So don't keep it a secret what I are doing in the PMO. Yeah. Build that trust by being transparent. Exactly, being open.
Okay, good. The last question is from Shiro. What does Lucky PM stand for? Because it's everywhere around you.
Yes. Well, it just means that I'm lucky. Indeed, I'm lucky on the projects that I've been managing, lucky on the people that I've been working with, the companies that I've been part of. And also, I think that luck is neglected very often. Of course, there is hard work involved, but sometimes it's just a matter of being in the right place at the right time. So I think we also need to consider luck more in our projects. And there is also a saying that says that there are no lucky project managers, only good ones. Only good ones, because the more you plan, the luckier you get.
Voila, yeah. Also, a nice quote I heard as well. Luck is where preparation meets opportunity.
Also, exactly.
Yeah. So listen, thanks a lot for your time. It was great. Thanks to everybody for participating. Also, thanks to Shiro for organizing all of this and contacting you and chasing you to come online and talk to us. That's
well,
very
thank
good.
you. Thank you, everyone.
Shiro also mentions that emotional intelligence is easier with beer and wine as well. So that's a tip
yes,
that we
agree.
give you to bring away with you. Okay. So,
thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody. It was great to have you on, and Marisa, take care. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.